some.
Hey, how you doing? I gotta apologize to Heaven too.
Sure.
I realized to my horror last night I misspelled his name on the bottom of my slides.
So if someone from IT could come unlock the computer, that would be great. I need a password unlock. While IT's coming down here to unlock the computer, we've got a couple of slides for you. Again, my name is Steve Bennett. I'm the moderator for this panel. I also want to thank the congressman and the steering committee for inviting Dr. McCreight and I to present, and just for putting on a fantastic forum. We look forward to the rest of the day and for the reception tonight. So this morning we're going to talk about unique threats from advanced technology. Get out of your way. Unlock that for me. Thank you. And we're going to talk about some policy actions that we can take advantage of to make some progress in mitigating the threats from those advanced technologies. So let me do a couple of introductions. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Robert McCreight to my right. He will be our second speaker in our panel. He spent, thank you, sir. He spent 27 years in the federal government working on a variety of national security projects and defense programs associated with nuclear, chemical, and biological defense matters. He's a periodic advisor on the Chemical Weapons Treaty and Biological and Toxins Weapon Convention, something I spoke about in Budapest several months ago. He's published extensively on WMD issues, and he's a guest lecturer at the National Defense University and about 1 million other universities, it looks like, from your pedigree. Next, and hopefully we're able to get John Strand from Denmark up on the live screen here in a second. John, due to, I think, childcare COVID issues with his childcare and canceled flights, couldn't be here in person from Denmark. We have heard from his better half, who may take his place if we can't get him up. Looks like he's there. Hi, John. Fantastic. So John's here. So John is, he'll be the final speaker in the panel. John is the CEO of Strand Consulting, founded in 1995. He's an expert in the evolution of Chinese telecommunication companies, really since 2005, and their impact to the market. John has produced many reports about 5G, Huawei, cybersecurity, and related topics, market share of equipment vendors, all related to security. He's one of the best-known consultants in the business, and I can attest to this. Anyone who's met John knows he's renowned for his trademark honesty and forthrightness, always speaking his mind, even if controversial or stepping on a toe or two. And then finally, you've got me. I'll be speaking first. My name is Steve Bennett. I'm the director of the Global Government Practice at SAS. I currently support SAS efforts to help governments in about 140 countries put their data to work for citizens and families that they serve. Prior to SAS, I held a number of leadership positions in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, most recently serving as a senior executive as the director of national biosurveillance for DHS. I'm a scientist by training, don't hold that against me. Ph.D. in computational biochemistry with degrees in biology and chemistry. Let me just grab my slides and I will... Our format today, we're going to, Bob and I are going to share a couple of short presentations, and then John's going to attempt to do the same from Denmark, and then we will have a short discussion and hopefully be able to involve some of the audience in some Q&A. So again, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about threats from advanced technologies, AI, 5G, even a new term you may not have heard of called neurocognitive warfare. It'll keep you awake waiting for Bob's presentation. We'll discuss policy options related to each of these and how governments can make progress. But none of this matters if the fundamental foundations of democratic governments are eroded, either in reality or in perception. So worrying about AI and 5G and other threats can end up looking like luxuries if there isn't substantial trust or belief in legitimacy of our government institutions. So partially as a way to set up Dr. McCreight, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the reality of psychological operations, a little bit of history, maybe the fastest 8 minutes of history in PsyOps you'll ever see, and then hopefully set the table for a great presentation from Dr. McCreight and a discussion with John and the rest of you at the end. So that is where we're headed. How many of you know who this is? Hey, some brave people. Many of you do. So this This creature's name is Pikachu. He is a fictional character, a creature, a species of something called a Pokemon. And these things appear in video games, movies, television shows, other assorted media. If you have kids, you likely know who this is. Pikachu is the best known species of Pokemon, largely due to his appearance in the Japanese anime series dating back many years ago. Now, as smartphones became capable with augmented reality, so we know virtual reality, you put the headset on and you see something that isn't there and you can interact with it. Augmented reality, or AR, is sort of a mix where something that isn't real gets sort of superimposed into the real environments. We call that AR. This is an example of Pikachu in an augmented reality sort of situation on a street corner. So as smartphones became capable with AR, Pokemon announced a video game several years ago. You may remember it. It was called Pokemon Go. And the goal of this game was to find and train these Pokemon characters in real-world locations using augmented capabilities of smartphones. You may have seen people stumbling around in parks, looking at their phones, tripping over each other. So released in July 2016, the game crossed about 1 billion downloads worldwide and had 147 million active monthly users at its peak. It's gained, I think, north of $3 billion in revenue. Well, as it turns out, in 2016, Pokemon promotions in the United States began to pop up associated with a nonprofit group called Don't Shoot Us. The promotion was targeted mostly in African American communities in the United States, and players were encouraged to name their Pokemon characters after the name of victims of police brutality, and then find an augmented reality Pokemon gym or location physically located near the crime scene. Players were encouraged to take screenshots and post them on social media, and then send them in to be entered in a contest to win prizes. Well, as it turns out, the nonprofit Don't Shoot Us wasn't an innocuous, justice-promoting nonprofit, but rather activity of the Russian Kremlin-linked group Internet Research Agency, or IRA, masquerading as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. And while it was unclear what their specific objectives were for that Pokemon Go activity, IRA-linked accounts were responsible for a number of attempts across a lot of digital platforms, like Pokemon Go, to exploit racial tensions in the United States and sow social discord amongst Americans. So where I worked until about 2015, the Department of Homeland Security has got many missions. One of those missions is cybersecurity and more recently, election security. So the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, part of DHS, somewhat recently formed, it considers election security as a critical sector, just like we think about energy, communications, chemical, dams, food and agriculture, and the like. So election security is considered a critical sector. And DHS, as I think all of us are, always worried about election security and the effect of psychological operations like this on trust and erosion, trust and legitimacy of government. So I'm going to talk today about kind of two ways that psychological operations can impact trust in legitimacy, either real or perceived, in government. One of them is cyber systems as the target. So other adversaries targeting the actual cyber infrastructure itself. And then the second will be use of cyber methods as a vector to target something else. And so I'll cover both of those. The first one a little bit more briefly. First, cyber as the target itself. So as has been widely publicized, we've had a lot of direct intrusion in the United States and a lot of other countries as well, direct intrusion into election systems. So the targeting of cyber systems itself, groups associated with Russia penetrated election systems in 21 U.S. states, accessing voter registration details for as many as 200,000 Americans. To be clear, no evidence of penetration of actual voting systems or manipulations of votes. No evidence of any of that, although they sure tried. Nevertheless, invaluable information about Americans and how the American election system works was gathered by the Russians. And even if nothing was touched, and even if there's no evidence of manipulation of election outcomes, continued perceptions of eroded trust in election systems, that can compound over time and erode perceived legitimacy of government, even if those systems never in fact were compromised. So that's kind of cyber as the target. We've heard a lot about that. In the last couple of minutes, I want to just focus on cyber as the vector. Again, returning to that Pokemon Go attempt where you're using cyber systems to influence other sorts of outcomes where it's a vector to do something else. So I promised you the briefest history of PSYOPs. I'm going to back up and give you a little bit of a history of psychological operations. It isn't new. It may sound new, but it isn't new at all. This gentleman is a Persian general by the name of Cambyses. And he fought and won the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC. And, if you look at the history of Pelusium, he learned that when he was fighting the Egyptians, that the Egyptians, because of their polytheistic spiritual beliefs, they had for reasons I won't get into in detail, they had a high placement of the value of cats. It was punishable by death if you harmed a cat in any way in Egyptian society. And so Cambyses knew this and took advantage of this, deploying his army to surrounding villages. They gathered up all the cats they could find, and then they released thousands of panicked cats onto the battlefield as they were attacking the Egyptians. As they were attacking Egyptians in the battle, they carried cats with them, which froze the Egyptian archers, unwilling to shoot and potentially hit or harm a cat. And it had a huge impact on the outcome. 50,000 Egyptians died, and only 7,000 Persians were lost. So this was the first known use at scale of what we would call psychological operations to try to have an impact on, in this case, a military outcome. A good definition of psychological operations here is any action practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of evoking a planned reaction in other people. Genghis Khan did this as well. He did all kinds of things like sending people ahead of him to spread rumors about how brutal he was, so that armies would fold without fighting. They drag large objects behind horses to, kick up a lot of dust from afar to make it look like they were big. They would drill holes in their arrows so that they would whistle as they came in to strike fear into the enemy. So lots of examples historically. World War I, lots of examples about, the UK had a fantastically successful psychological operation detailing German atrocities during World War I, some of them real, some of them not. The biggest psychological operation in history, though, was in World War II, and that was Operation Bodyguard, which really, if you have a chance to study that, it's a fascinating story of how the Allies in Tehran planned to convince Nazi Germany that the invasion of Normandy would happen much later and in a different place. So a hugely complex psychological operation. Modern psychological operations, of course, still continue today for pursuit of advancing the ideas of a nation that's trying to make some sort of objective a reality. So back to the Russians. So what do the Russians do in terms of cyber as a vector? I mentioned that Pokemon Go story. What I'm going to argue is that what the Russians have done and still do is just classic psychological operations against an adversary, but with some key differences given the nuances of modern technology. So we saw a lot of intrusions into computer systems for political parties and campaigns. You've seen a lot of those. Tens of thousands of Democratic National Committee emails leaked that caused change in leadership for a political party, so that's a political outcome based on these operations. 3,000 advertisements across Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of other platforms, largely tied to Russian IRA. Tens of thousands of dollars in Google ads, 470 Facebook accounts, on and on and on. Interestingly, though, there were attempts from the Russians to move from owned to third-party channels. The leadership of that group, that Don't Shoot Us fake group, they attempted to give interviews to journalists to get third-party validation in the media. And they also attempted to move from digital to physical. There were several occasions where they were trying to organize real-world protests against police. To our knowledge, none of those successful, but attempts to move into third-party validation and from digital to physical. So what's new now? Well, what's new now is we're even more distributed than we were, and just a couple of key policy actions as I close and turn it over to Dr. McCreight. So what can we do about it? One, I would say recognize the material threat that modern psychological operations present to democracy. It's a matter of just first not putting our head in the sand and saying, well, these things aren't a big deal. They could be a big deal. Second, commit to effective citizen engagement and information sharing. Nothing beats being able to figure out what's true and what's not by a well-informed, well-educated citizenry. Third, use of advanced tools to mitigate advanced threats. So things like data analytics and AI, which came up in the second panel. It'll come up, I think, all day, given the topics we're covering. Those advanced tools can go a long way towards helping you spot things that look like they're artificial or tied to illegitimate accounts or illegitimate sources, and things that are legitimate. And then finally, modernizing oversight of platforms that can serve as vectors for psychological operations. Of course, that last one has to be done with great care, because all of us care about preserving privacy and free speech on these platforms, but thinking about ways to modernize the way that we oversee the technology that can serve as vectors for a lot of these operations that can impact our elections and perception of government legitimacy. We'll have time for questions, I think, at the end. So with that, as a setup, I will turn it over to Dr. McCreight. Sir, I'll get your slides loaded up for you. And you're going to learn a lot in this presentation. Okay, should be able to use that.